Welcome back on this glorious and amazing day. We mentioned in part 2 of child molestation prevention that love, attention, and affection will prevent the child of encountering a situation of having someone older get close to them and eventually touch them. And we mentioned that there's other steps as well to do in order to bring it up to a higher level of prevention, which is not the safe talk, and to put more responsibility on adults rather on children. The very simple, there's a few pieces of advice in various areas. Number one is, when you send your child to a day camp, overnight camp especially, just ask the camp to email you, to send you their policy regarding open door policy. Being alone with a camper. So many camps have it in place. Some camps still do not have it. They don't deal with it. There is no issue of a counselor being in a classroom, in a room, in a place, in a dressing room with the child by themselves. So you might want to investigate and ask the camp what their policy is. The other one, number 2, is quite interesting. After all the hype and the knowledge about molestation, again, we're still a little bit behind. It was about 4 or 5 years ago I was asked to speak in an overnight camp to counselors about molestation. Yeah, not to children, to counselors. And as I was talking, I mentioned to them, there's no problem giving a child a hug before the kids go to sleep. Right before they're ready to go to bed, you offer your hug, and that's okay. And the counselor says, just to give them a hug? And I say, what do you mean? And they express that they go to bed with the campers, which means they snuggle with them and they hug them and they actually go into bed. So you have this 17, 18-year-old counselor going into bed with the 10-year-old. And I said, that's a huge no-no. And then I spoke to the camp director. I said, what's your policy? And they never had one. So why am I talking to the child about good touch and bad touch? Why am I keeping the child responsible? Number 2 in our list is go to the camp, especially overnight camp, and find out the policy. I have no problem with affection and touch, but if it's done casually and it's done publicly, it's fine. If the lights are closed and you decide that you have your favorite camper, there's a big problem with it, and the counselors really got very upset, and I told them there is no going to bed, but they said we're not doing anything wrong. I said that's not the issue. Between affection and sexuality, it's so close, and once you get affectionate and you have your own personal issues, especially if you were molested yourself, before you know it, your hands are going in other places. Campers do not feel comfortable, and if they do feel comfortable, that's a problem because they're lacking it and their mother and father needs to give them. And by the way, this applies as well to a parent. Yeah, I know you think it doesn't exist, but in my reality, listening to people, it does exist because parents actually talk to me about it, or adults talk to me about what happened to them as children, that their own parents themselves touched them. If any parent feels sexual, like there's one parent talking to me, Orthodox family, that she has her 9 or 10-year-old child with her in bed at night and she's barely dressed. I mean, that's not affection. That's definitely blurred boundaries, maybe worse than blurred boundaries. That is breaking the boundaries. So even as a parent, if we feel sexual with our child, we do not go into bed and lie down and get cozy and get too warm. Yes, we can hug them, and everyone knows their situation, what they feel at what time. As I said before, I went to the camp director and he agreed and he implemented it, and I was very happy. But there is no going into bed with your campers. Even if you're not planning to touch them, you just don't do it because we're there. You want to give them a hug, great. But lying down in bed is you're asking for problems, and I would like to stop them before they start. Number 3. It's one day late, just coming from Thanksgiving yesterday. Number 3 is something very interesting where a lot of cases of molestation could be prevented not by the child, again, not holding the child responsible, rather the adult. And this we got to be very careful with of how we do it. But number 3 is be aware of where your children are. Yeah, families getting together in the weekends, Thanksgiving, and typically you go into the basement or you go into the backyard or wherever it is, and you have children of all ages. Parents love to socialize, have a good time, and we have the kids all out. Years ago, I used to listen to Dr. Laura Schlesinger before she went flying off radio stations. Although I disagree with her method of how she presents her thoughts and her lack of sensitivity. However, I must say that she's brilliant, sharp, and powerful. And I love listening to her because my mind worked the same. I knew what she's going to say, and it was a lot of fun. It was very entertaining listening to her. There was one type of call that you could call in from anywhere in the world with this similar story. She always had the same exact answer, and I truly loved it. And this is part what we're going to talk about. People would talk about, well, families got together by the weekend, and we got into a family with my brother-in-law, with my sister-in-law, with this family, with that family. What happened was the kids were together in the basement, blah, 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 and this one hurt this one, and then when I came to confront the mother, this is what happened. Everyone, the same story. How do I go about it, I'm Dr. Laura? I found out that the cousin touched this cousin inappropriately, blah, blah, blah. And the hundreds of stories, and she had one simple answer, which most therapists wouldn't give. She would ask the exact same question. She wouldn't tell you what to do with the argument, with the fighting, on how to go about things. She would ask the following. So when your children and your nieces or nephews or your cousins were playing together, who was the adult supervising? And 99%, the answer was always the same. There was no adult supervising, and obviously she just lost it, Dr. Laura. She would yell and scream and freak out. But the concept is right. When children are playing, it's not to be on top of them and to show them that you don't trust them, but to be around. Many molestation situations are when families get together and there's an older cousin, there's a younger cousin, and suddenly they alert into the washroom, or if there's a nice big backyard, there's always an area that things can happen. Supervision, supervision, supervision. Proactive, proactive, proactive. Now, within supervision, I must say that there's 2 ways to do it. One way is to be around. So, for example, if there's older children and younger children in the basement, you come down, sit down in a corner with your phone or with a book and pretend you're doing your own stuff, just to be around, which, by the way, you could prevent lots of stuff happening, not only molestation. Please don't come down to the basement or wherever the children are hanging out and say, I'm just coming to make sure everything is fine. I hope everyone's behaving. Because essentially what you're saying to them, I don't trust you, I don't trust you, I don't trust you, and you're planting stuff in their brain, which makes it worse. So whenever we do supervise even older children, we have to do it in a way of safe face, dignity, and respect. Dignity and respect. Just like you have a supervisor within a factory, one way they can walk in and they make you feel like you're a piece of garbage and they don't trust you. The other way is they come by and they smile and they say, very nice, like what you're doing. Basically, I'm coming here to compliment you. So the way the supervision is done is very important, and in most cases there was no supervision. And I just remember the story. It's so painful, it hurts me. But years ago, when I used to teach in the school system, the principal, it was on a recess, and the principal gathered all the teachers like for emergency 5-minute meeting. I forget about what. And I remember just gathering together in the schoolyard, and suddenly I had knots in my stomach and I couldn't figure out what's going on. And I realized there was no one supervising the kids. I looked at the principal in his eyes. I said, I gotta go. I'm sorry. And I just walked away, and I went where all the kids were playing to supervise. I couldn't understand how we could allow, even for 1 minute, not to supervise and to be responsible over children. My practical advice when families get together, and it's okay for children not to sit at a table that long. Children usually are awesome. They eat what they need to eat, and they go play. But there should be, even days in advance to discuss, but at least before the meal, that the adults get together. That's why I like it to be done days in advance so the children don't see this sort of plan. But adults should say, okay, we're 4 adults here. We're going to be having fun for the next 2 hours. Let's make a system who's going to be around the kids. But again, in a way that the kids should not feel you're on top of them. And let's be proactive and have a roster of who's going to be watching. So you don't want one parent being in the basement for the 2 hours while the other 3 parents having fun. But just to hang around, to be around. And again, the child or the children should not feel like you're on top of them and you're watching them and you're dictating every single move. If the kids get into a little argument, let them try to work it out on their own, but that's a separate topic for itself. Only if you must intervene, you can intervene, or if you can intervene by asking them how they should go about it, so on and so forth. Have yourself a wonderful day, and we'll continue on in the next clip with a few more pieces of advice of how to protect our children. All the best, and have a wonderful, delightful day. Thanks for joining.